really pleased to have been given this opportunity of reporting my latest research. I'm one of those who's been active in landscape field research for 3 or 4 decades now, and I haven't published really very much of it. There have been some books which have been, let's say, written on the, as progress reports, but now I'm getting into my last years. I'm trying to finish off everything, and I'm going to produce about 1 book a year if I live long enough, certainly for the next 5 years. So the opportunity today is to introduce a completely new way of looking at stone circles. We all love stone circles, don't we? Everyone in this room, I'm sure, has visited many and many times. Probably, though, not too many of us have been to stone circles to see sunrises. It's definitely the best time to go. On a clear sky morning, to see a sunrise at a stone circle is magic. And even if you don't know what's happening, the feel of it is just superb. I've done this dozens and dozens of times, maybe 100 times, at sunrise. And I've been doing it, though, because I came to discover the importance of doing this at doing the research or advancing the research at sunrise. It gradually came to me after a lot of investigation that shadows were happening in a deliberate way at sunset and at sunrise, and on some occasions, in some places, at midday as well. But it became increasingly clear that at least some stone circles were planned, designed to work at sunrise. The ancient people lived the full day from sunrise to sunset and beyond. But most of us today don't see sunrises, or at least we don't see them in the summer. I'm going to urge you actually to get out and go to your favorite stone circles and look at them again at sunrise. What I'm going to explain is, will not apply to all stone circles, but it certainly applies to a lot of them, and it probably applies to all recumbent stone circles. So, as I say, I'm using this occasion to talk about the archetype one, which is easier to use for illustration, Drombeg Stone Circle, because everything is there. Now, this lecture today I gave in Japan last August. I was allowed about 20 minutes, and today, therefore, I have a better opportunity to include a lot of detail which was missed out. Even so, there is going to be a lot more detail missed out, I'm afraid, because there's a lot to say, and it would need really a series of lectures to go through everything. Drombeg is in County Cork. It's a beautiful circle in a very nice place, very appealing, and its primary element is the recumbent stone there. In County Cork, there are about 100 stone circles with a recumbent stone like that, but of different sizes, and many of the others are more or less damaged. So this is a useful one to work on because nearly every original stone is still there. Right, another angle to the same stone. There's the recumbent stone, and the main diameter through the circle comes from passing between those two. And the numbering system starts here with 1, 2, 3, 4. This is 9, and then we come around and end up at 17. So numbers 1 and 17 are the entrance stones which play their own crucial role in all this. In evaluating the scheme of things here, I came across an explanation for what I could call a Neolithic calendar appropriate to the Irish Neolithic and the British Neolithic. Just to show here that Drombeg is over here. County Cork is that part of Ireland. That's where Drombeg is. Here we have our own Wessex. Up here in northeast Scotland is another zone where there are about 100 recumbent stone circles. And so the comments I'm making really apply quite widely to everything here or everything here, and dotted around some of the other places too. Let me also show you that I was born in the middle of this area. I was born in Trowbridge on the edge of Salisbury Plain, and all my ancestors with my name, Meaden, are from Imber, the village that was evacuated in 1942 to allow the American Army to come in and do their maneuvers. But all the church records show that all the Meadens, back to when the records began, were from Imber village, and the men were marrying girls from mostly villages elsewhere on Salisbury Plain. I also have another line of descent which takes me back to Avebury as well. So I have two long ancestral lines which involve Avebury and Stonehenge, and which helped form my deep interest in the subject when I was still a boy. I wanted to do archaeology at university, but I also wanted to go to Oxford, and the two would not mix. The university academics in archaeology in Oxford at the time, like Richard Atkinson, had all learnt classical archaeology. In order to get in, you had to pass well, have an interview, but pass the written exam in classical Greek as well as in Latin. And I had the Latin but not the Greek. So I went to Oxford on physics instead and had a physics career in university teaching for some 20 years. But that had taken me, though, into North America. And as I wanted to bring up my family, I have a French wife, we wanted to get back into Europe and bring up our children in Europe, either in France or in England. So I retired early. By age 40, I had retired. And but being back in England, I took on other roles and got going as soon as I could in archaeology again. Now, Stonehenge, we all know. That is a typical photograph from the air. But one really major stone is not shown on that photograph, and that's the heel stone. If we go over here now, the really major stone that is in that photograph, you can hardly see. It's the altar stone. It's lying flat on the ground, and two heavy stones are on top of it. But those two that I've named are the key stones to Stonehenge. So firstly, there's the heel stone, which is forever looking at the monument. That's a sunset photograph. And we do know that we can see the sun setting into the distant main trilithon on the occasion of the midwinter sunset. But what really matters is what happens at sunrise in the summer. Now, when you go to Stonehenge and stand in the middle, like we did on Friday, you can see the heel stone from that position, but it is not above the horizon. It's below the horizon, even below the trees. And that's where everybody takes their photographs. They just show it as being level, the top level with the horizon of trees. And today the sun rises pretty well level, in line with the heel stone. But it didn't 4,000 and 5,000 years ago. It rose, as seen from the center, to the left. The way to take the correct photograph is to sit down in the middle of Stonehenge, or even lie down. And the reason for that is because the important thing that happens at Stonehenge is the shadow of the heel stone. It does enter the monument, and it does it every time in Midsummer Week, provided the sun is out and shining. Very often the sun is too weak really to show a strong shadow in the first minute or two. But you can see it. It's not so easy to photograph. There is a photograph, and I've seen the shadow going into the middle of the monument. And I say it's deliberate. And when it gets there, the shadow falls on the altar stone, which in at least the last phase of use of the monument, which was 1,000 years from 2500 BC onwards, was lying flat. The shadow goes through and reaches it. Now we'll talk about why later on, but I'm making this point strongly at the start, because this is foreknowledge that I had before I went out to Ireland and started looking at the Irish stone circles. Yes, I'm emphasizing this because there are, let's say, academic archaeologists who are reluctant to accept that the whole thing was deliberate, by saying simply that, well, if we put the heel stone up as a marker towards the midsummer sunrise, then a shadow is bound to go in. So how can you say that's deliberate? So that's been my problem, because I got this far a couple of decades ago, and my first book on Stonehenge was talking about this very thing, and that's 1992. I needed to find other stone circles where the same would happen, or even happen better. So this took me really to a lot of places, but it included me eventually getting to Drombeg. Now, when I first arrived in Drombeg, it was 5 years ago, and I saw at once there were good possibilities. The stones were not all equal in size. They were not regularly ranged around the circumference of a circle with equal spacing. They were different. They had different heights. They had different shapes. And this really, at once, gave me hope that we would get somewhere. So there is a plan. That's my plan. There is a plan by the archaeologist who excavated Drombeg in the 1950s, and on his plan he made a major mistake, which I'll come to in a few minutes' time. The one thing what everybody knew about Drombeg is that when you're looking at it from between those entrance stones over the Recumbent Stone to the hill beyond, then Is there a notch in the hill, and the sun sets into it in the week of midwinter. That was spotted by an archaeologist in 1909, or at least that's when he reported it, and it got into the books in 1909. And since then, for 100 years, people have been going there to see that happen. And, well, that's my own photograph. It happens all right. So here we are now looking at the portal stones again. The two that matter, these are the two. That's stone 1 and that's stone 17. Firstly, stone 1 has on it shapes formed by geology, entirely natural. But it looks like, through natural geological forces, there is here a simulacrum of a body. And I've heightened it to really clarify what we're looking at. Well, if we can see it, they could see it. The people who chose that stone and put it up there. So why did they pick on that stone to put it there? They could have put it anywhere else, or put it upside down. But they chose that stone to use because they saw something in it. We have a feeling that there is animism involved in this. And now the other stone. That's the one I've just talked about. And this one here now has a carving on it as well. And that's the carving. It's an ithyphallus, an erect penis. It's quite weather-worn, and nobody saw that until it was spotted by my friend Austin Kingsley last September. And it is on a stone which is tall, narrow, straight-sided, which, in terms of typical symbology, suggests it's a male stone. So it has always looked like a male stone, or it also acts like one in casting shadows. But it's actually got a carving on it as well. It's shouting out to the world, no, this is a male stone. Here is an ithyphallus to prove it. The people were putting symbols into their stones, and we're reading back the symbols at last. We're now going to consider the recumbent stone, which is a female stone. It's female partly because it's lying flat, and females do often lie flat. But to prove it, they went to a lot of trouble and carved a vulva on it. There's a couple of cup marks there as well, but there is a vulva carved into it. Here I did a tracing, so that was a nice level piece of paper that I laid over it and flattened it down, and this really stresses the carving. What did the excavator Edward Fahey have to say about that in 1958? He said, well, it doesn't look much like an axe. Because everybody was fond of axes then. It was a time when axe carvings were being found at Stonehenge and supposedly at other places. And so he didn't really make any comment except to say, well, it's not a very good axe. Well, now, Midsummer Sunrise. From what I've said, you can already suspect what's going to happen. The stone which is here, that particular entrance stone, is the one that's going to cast a shadow onto this when the sun rises over here. So the first attempt I made got there at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, and the sky was clear, everything looked promising. The sun had already risen for anyone who was down at sea level, and the sea is just the other side of that hill. But a little shower cloud started coming, and it got nearer and nearer, and it moved very fast. And at just the moment that the sun came over the hill, or at least the first peak, the first little glow of the sun came over the hill, the cloud got there and hid it completely. I got no photographs that day, and no photographs either in subsequent days at the point of sunrise. I got photographs, but the sun had already risen. So there, you have to reckon with the bad weather as well as the good weather, and so it was. So this is really what's happening. The vulva, the carved vulva, is here, in there. And in the first minutes after sunrise, the shadow of this stone is falling on this half of the vulva, including the vulva itself. We have a male-female relationship. A male stone has cast a male shadow onto a female image. And this shows the same thing in a rather different way. That's what I've really just said. There's the carving, and in the next few minutes, the sunshine, in moving out to the north, brings light onto the carving. It's the first experience of this being witnessed at this place, I think, for some 3,500 years. But it's been happening every midsummer throughout that time. So this is the first photograph I could get, and it's not very good. This is the full shadow, but there's also here a little bit of, there's something else a bit in the way. The edge of the shadow is down here. All that's in shadow. Again, the demonstration is clear, but that again is the shadow of some object that shouldn't be there and isn't there in subsequent photographs I took in other years. But on this first occasion, I didn't realize there was something left in the way there. That's the edge of the shadow as the whole thing clears away to the right, as there. So, let's start considering the effects of stones which are spaced irregularly. I put that photograph there to really emphasize the fact that the stones are irregularly spaced, and it's deliberate. There is a reason for it. So that picture was just taken by standing more or less in front of them. But the next picture, to do that, I moved around to the recumbent stone and looked at the same stones from the recumbent stone. And now an artificial notch has been created. And I get out my compass, and what do I see? I see that it's the direction of the equinoctial sunrise. And that's it, starting to happen. I'll show you a better photograph in a moment. But in effect, this is the way it appears on a plan. So, there's the sun coming up through that notch. There is a hill that interferes and delays the sunrise in many of these situations. In fact, the sun is rising at the circle about half an hour later than it does if you were down by the sea. So that's the last of those pictures. But turning around, and before that, I'll just mention this. Perhaps you can't see it. It's not clear. There's a man there with a camera and a camera on a tripod. I can hardly see it there, but it's fairly clear on my picture here. He was just taking a sunrise photograph and was pretty annoyed that I was there spoiling his picture. But that's the picture I was taking. It's a very important picture. So I move around and take a picture of what is actually happening. And I spoke about that sunshine through the notch. You can see it here. There's a little patch of light there. And then there's this long vertical shaft of light between the shadows of the two stones. But this is the key stone, the one that's doing the male-female action on this occasion. So that is the fundamental situation, which was set up deliberately so that the recumbent stone, having already had a male-female shadow interaction on it at midsummer, is also the same thing as happening at the equinox, well, the two equinoxes. And in between, we have Beltane. And at Beltane, a different stone is doing this, the job. So that's stone 2, which is active in this case. So we started off with stone 1 throwing a shadow. Beltane, stone 2 does it. And down here we have stone 4, or 4 and 5 together doing it. You can see, I hope it's clear enough. I mean, it's clear enough here. I don't know how well things show up there, but we have the first of the shadows here. You can see it on the recumbent, and that's the end of the recumbent stone in light. And here, this is just a few minutes later, in which the shadow has moved to the right quite a bit, and on it now we have the shadow that's moved away. Do you see that in there? That's the carved vulva on this female stone, and this is the male shadow. And that's just a picture that says the very same thing. So I've gone through, at the moment, the summer 6 months of the year. 5 festival dates are involved, which are familiar to us, even in our modern times. I have been numbering the days on the basis that if we call the winter solstice day 1, and then you count onwards, the spring equinox comes at day 92, which is the 22nd of March. And then we have the 6th, when we get to the Beltane, or the May Day festival, we find it's the 6th of May, day 137. That's when the equivalent of those photographs were taken. But if I'd been there on May the 1st, it wouldn't have worked. May the 1st is 5 days earlier than that, and everything would have been offline. The point I'm coming to is that the basis of a Neolithic calendar seems to be one of a day count. They could never know when a true equinox is. We ourselves have problems deciding when an equinox is. And the way we define it, by using modern astronomy, the astronomers and their tables and their calculations, they tell us within 1 minute whether it's going to be the 20th or the 21st or the 22nd. These people couldn't count minutes, but they could count days. And it's looking like the year was evenly divided up in this fashion, such that every 45 or 46 days, another event happens. And I'm going to continue to say that all of these dates are built into this stone circle. And the effects don't work if you choose wrong dates. And it's very easy for them to count. I know I've heard some people say they can't count up to 183 or 365, but they can. It's really very easy. It's very easy to make a tally stick. And now you might think I'm leaning on a walking stick, but this walking stick is carved, is cut all the way along with notches, which are recording the days. And all that was necessary was that on day 1, a notch is cut here, and then some person who can be called the sky watcher for the community was counting days. So the next day he cuts another notch, and then he goes on cutting notches all the way through. And when he gets here, he has reached day 92, the spring equinox. And if he has a loose band like this, he just puts it on and ties it tightly on whatever is the right notch for that particular day. So we go along here 92 days, and we come back 91 days to get back. So what was day 1 becomes day 183. Repeat that 4 times, or twice aller retour, and you have a 365-day calendar. Let's go on. There is another female stone at Drombeg. It is the shape of a lozenge. And next to it is a straight-sided megalith, which is flat-topped, deliberately flat-topped, and it's out of line. Looking now at this map, that's the stone I'm talking about. This is the lozenge stone, and here we have that little pillar stone. And what's important is that when we get to the 22nd of March or the 20th of September, the rising sun comes over the hill and goes through this gap and strikes the pillar, and its shadow goes into the middle of the female stone. So there's the lozenge showing you again. I'm showing it to you though from the outside this time. That's a late afternoon photograph. And here is a drawing made by Dr. Fahy, who worked at Drombeg excavating it in the summers of 1957 and 58, and his paper was published in 1959. And he does comment that these stones, if we work on the basis of what was already being discussed at Avebury, we have male and female stones. So, the Avebury concept, initiated by Alexander Keeler, was taken over by other people, including Edward Fahy. So he put that into his paper. And his comment is that this male-female symbolism here suggests there is fertility involved. In some way or other, it's a fertility monument. And that's where he stopped. He didn't go that extra distance as I did, because when I got there on that first day, I was looking at those two stones, and I stood to the left of stone 14, the lozenge, looked across the top of it, and that was also looking across the top of 15, and this is a photographic proof. Here we see then, this is the top of the lozenge. You can't see the pillar stone, except unless that little bit there is probably the top of it. Yeah, that must be just the very top of it. And that direction takes us to the first gleam of the sun on the 20th of September, 2012. Well, Dr. Fahy could have done that. He's the one who was there. He lived there for 2 summers. And he makes the point that somehow fertility could be involved. And I go there and I see this. The spacing is deliberate in order to allow this to happen. So that's Dr. Fahy's plan. The bit of it that matters is the bit at the top. So here we are. That's the pillar stone. And you can see, looking here, if the sun's coming through here, it just cannot land on this, and it cannot throw a shadow into the middle of that. For a shadow of that to fall onto the middle of the lozenge, this would have to be moved. Or this one needs to be moved. In fact, both, I think, were moved a little bit. But that certainly prompted me to do my own survey. So I spent a lot of time doing a new survey, and I end up with something like this. For the bit that matters, that's the only bit wrong on his plan. But effectively, he had this pillar stone in here, instead of where it really is. In fact, you can also see that in a drone photograph, which we'll reach later on. So, there's a picture, and there's the reality. A problem at this site is that, or really it applies to any site, if there's cloud on the horizon, it can mess up the first 5 minutes of one's observations. And this is how it was on this occasion. The first 4 or 5 minutes, the sun was obscured, and then it was there, but it was too weak. So this picture was taken about 5 minutes after sunrise. It was probably a bit better earlier on. You now see here in this particular photograph how it's dead in the middle. Beautiful. Male, female interaction. And remember, I was introducing you to the portal stone number 17. That's the one with the male carving on its other side. Well, it too, in its turn, throws its shadow onto the lozenge stone as well. Well, nobody can argue with these photographs. Anyone can go there and check. Everyone is welcome to go there and check, because you'll get the same things. You've got to have good weather. And it's a little bit different for the other 2 dates relative here. The lozenge, the shadow throwing stone this time is going to be stone 2, which is that one. And the sun is going to rise over here, coming this way. That pillar stone you can't see, it's hidden over here, because that was the way the sun came through at the equinox. Okay, that just shows you what the sun is doing. And again, on this occasion, there was a distant cloud that spoilt the first few minutes. But the first fairly decent photograph, namely this one, just shows on the lozenge, just on almost full shadow. A few minutes earlier, that was totally in shadow, and now a little bar of light is appearing here. And a few minutes later, is all gradually getting more and more illuminated. Now we come to the winter solstice. That is a practical drawing of the current situation. There is no shadow being cast onto the female lozenge. But we learn by looking at the records of the Cork Archaeological Society that in 1903 there was a stone there. Denham Franklin measured it, he described it. 6 years later, Captain Somerville goes there and there's no stone. It's gone. And that's how it's been for the last 110 years. No stone. But I'm saying to myself, who would take such a stone, a crucial one that's within the central area? Surely it's got to be somebody who's a bit important relative to the stone circle. It's going to be the owner, surely. Who was the owner? So I start interviewing people all around the nearest village, and I learned the name of the family that's owned it for much of this time. And it turns out that the tenant farmer was living at a house called Drombeg House, only 500 meters away. So I go to that house and I find that stone. It's the only big megalith anywhere in the garden. There's a couple of tiny ones, but that one is 1 meter high, and its shape corresponds with what Denham Franklin had seen in 1903. So from now onwards, I'm calling this the Franklin stone. So I photograph it, and I blow the photograph up. I make a cardboard replica, full size, and I stick the photograph onto one side of it, and I take it to the circle, and I put it in that position. That position being along the main axis that goes through the portal entrance to the recumbent, and also crosses the line to the mid-winter sunrise. So, there is my replica. That's a photograph of the piece of cardboard as a cutout. And later I was able to photograph the other side. So, the plan has been changed. It's been changed and a stone's been put in place. And there's the replica. And there's the shadow falling on the female lozenge. Now we're looking at a sunrise. In this particular direction, the sun rises over the sea. All the other directions were affected by the hill out there to the left. But here now we see the sun rising out of the sea. And again, and again. Very, very beautiful. And so then we now see when the replica stone is angled that way, it all works very nicely. Here is a drone picture of the same thing. And you see the shadow falling on what is the lozenge. And notice also, that's the pillar stone. Some of these other stones are slightly leaning one way or the other, and that's why they don't look as sharp as you see on the plan. But there we are, that's really very nice. So we now have a set for the winter festivals as well. And I've marked that out with the 365 days of the year, which I say can be easily measured using a tally stick. Even if they didn't know how to count up to 365, it doesn't matter. What matters is their observation of the sun coming over the horizon and having a day count in some way. So you can mark a tally stick, like I've done, without even knowing how to count anything. You just look at it and see where the marker is on it for that particular day. So now we have a set now for the 5 festivals of the winter half of the year. This is no accident. The whole thing is deliberate, and it is watchable. It is something that you can look at and admire, appreciate. So that summarizes all the 8 traditional agricultural dates, the ones we know today as well. And we are talking here about the late Neolithic and early Bronze Age. And I've taken this further. I've made a study of long barrows across the whole of Wessex, 100 of them. And I did that for a thesis. So that was a thesis accepted by Oxford University for my master's degree. It means that these festival dates that we call Celtic ones are much older, much, much older. As I say, what I've just done for Drombeg, and by the way, it's the same for Avebury and other stone circles, applies for the late Neolithic. But the long barrows are early Neolithic, and they also work according to the same dates. So when I give a lecture on long barrows, which might be here next year, because Hugh has invited me to come back next year, thank you, Hugh, you're going to see that these same dates occur again, but earlier, early Neolithic. The barrows were being built from certainly 3700 BC onwards. So everything I've said can be tested. Anyone can go and appreciate. Let's take a quick look at Knowth. Knowth has a curb ring of stones. All those stones are carved, and the ones that matter are those in front of the passages. And when we look at this, you can see the entrance to the eastern passageway is in here. And here we have on the curbstone a vertical line. And I've calculated that that stone, its shadow will meet that at the equinox. Ditto for the other side of the Knowth. Just the same thing there. They look almost the same. And I hope to be there this coming autumn, I've been invited, and I'm going to meet Professor Ogan, who spent 12 or 15 years of his life excavating there. It's the same much really for Newgrange. 3 of the external stones are aligned to this major curbstone for the winter dates of the year, the ones running from autumn equinox through the winter to the spring equinox. And what's happening there is that a shadow of that stone is moving across and downwards. During this time, the sun is going through the box up there, and the whole thing takes, 10 or 20 minutes, doesn't it? Now, back to Stonehenge, and let's try and be quick about this. So we have a phallic stone standing outside, throwing a shadow into the middle, and the direction of the sunrise for the midsummer sunrise, when the major stones went up, is along the middle of the avenue, and that means the sun is rising, if you're in the middle, to the left of the stone, and the shadow of that stone goes into the middle, and it lands on the altar stone, which is this one down here. Another true picture, followed by another one there. Another painting that gives you an idea of what's happening. And here we are inside. The shadow comes up here. This is the shadow ending up in the middle of this flat stone. So Stonehenge is also a recumbent stone circle. We have 100 in Cork, we have 100 in Aberdeen, and we have one in Wiltshire. This is a recumbent stone circle. It's never been called that before, but it is. So what does it all mean? It certainly means there's a fertility religion. But I think we can go beyond that and say that really it is in the belief system of the people who designed and built the monument. Well, the monument of Stonehenge and the monument of Drombeg and most of the others, there was, in fact, what we can politely say was a marriage of the sky god with the earth mother. But in fact, it's more than just marriage, it's a consummation of the marriage, visibly. And that must have been reassuring to the people of the time. They were living a fragile life. They depended on their farm produce, their livestock, their crops, and their women all being fertile. And in the case of the crops, not only did they have to plant successfully and harvest successfully, but in between, they had to have rain and sun at the right times. And they weren't always getting it. And when you don't get it, somebody comes along and says, I'll tell you why. It's not working. It's because you're not praying to the, let's say, the earth goddess or the great goddess. You're not praying enough. And we will devise a system by which we can show you stones imitating the marriage of the gods, the sky god with the earth mother. And you'll be there each time there's a festival. We'll give you the dates, we'll tell you in advance when they're coming. They can work that out easily by just looking at the skyline every morning or using a tally stick. They could forecast when the next event would be. The word would go out to all the farms within 10, 20, 30 miles, who knows how far, saying In 4 days' time, it's going to be the midwinter solstice. And they would all pack up and come over to the camp all around the monument for 4 or 5 or 6 days maybe, hoping to see a clear sky sunrise, to see the shadow working, and to perform, obviously, ceremonies. Such a time would be also an agricultural festival, a trade fair, and in addition, that's when the boys would meet the girls more easily, and life would go on. So I have the whole year there, and I'm insisting that the key factor is shadow casting, male shadows onto female stones. It's just the same for Avebury, which I will skip through quickly, but notice this is Stukely's map, but I've had to put the obelisk back up. This works just beautifully from the Beltane stone to the obelisk. And there's the Beltane stone. It has a vulva in the middle. It's a very nice vulva. It even has a clitoris. Yeah, we can't hide from that. So that's what it is. And beyond that, there's more. Here's Avebury, all tucked into there. But there are lines that go out to the hill, these eastern hills. There's a skyline there. And on that skyline, stones have been placed. So let's just only consider this. We follow the Beltane line to what is the edge of the hill. And there is a stone there now. And that's the stone that's there now. Another lozenge stone with a vulva carved on it. It's not a simulacrum, that's a carving. Serendipity, though, has given us red algae, which have been growing in the water-filled hollow. And there's the northern circle also. There's the northern circle again, where the cove is. Notice, though, there is an extra stone. The cove is really a 4-stone monument. We'll be there on Tuesday, and I'll be showing you this. This is a sunrise situation. Look, when I took that, it shows you how far back I was thinking of these things. There's the sun just showing, and on another occasion it showed like that. But what was happening really was the shadow of this stone was placed to be thrown into the middle of the central cove stone. Here's another of Stukely's pictures. That's my shadow standing where that missing stone used to be. So the whole thing is, as I say, the marriage of the gods. It's really summarized like that. It's an entirely different and logical explanation for these monuments, at least, and those academics who criticized this for being possibly just an accident. I'm emphasizing that at Drombeg, not only do you get the same thing, but you get it 8 times a year, and Avebury was the same. So that's where I should stop, and there is a book all about this on the book stands out at the back, and that's what it looks like. Now, really very quickly, we're going to go to West Kennet Longbarrow, and the lintel has got a carving there of the head of a deer, maybe a doe, or it could be a calf. And the carving is beautiful, it's all there. There's a mouth, an eye, an ear, a whole muzzle, shows up really nicely. And inside, there is one perfect carving. That carving of a human head has got everything. Eye, nose, lips to the mouth, chin, and an ear. But not many people ever see it. And that is something that it ought to be in all the books which are written about Avebury. But some books don't seem to carry it, although I've made it very clear and very public for the last 15 years At the cove, there is a carving of a hare, and it's something like that. It's in a boxing position, standing on its hind legs, boxing. But if you move around, as you see me here, and look at it edgeways, you get instead a human face in profile. And it's the same surface. The hair is the same surface as this. It is a perfect carving. I've got sculptors there who can see the marks in various places where the hammer stones were reshaping it. And then if you walk from that position round clockwise, you get this sequence in which there we are again, the head in profile is gradually changing and it's turning into this hair again. Sequence of pictures, very nice, easy to do. If it's sunny, we'll be doing that on Tuesday. And that is where I stop. Thank you very much.